Welcome to Bio 141, Chapter 1. This is the first recording of the chapter. Hopefully we can get it all done in this particular recording, but these are only 15 minutes long, and sometimes things take longer than that to discuss. So let's get going. Hopefully you have looked over the material in the textbook, and this will be a reintroducing a exposure to the same material. The first thing that we do is we define the difference between anatomy and physiology. Now, please understand that it is somewhat difficult to separate the two. They actually operate very much together. You need to know the anatomy, the structures of the body in order to understand the physiology, and sometimes the structures don't make particular sense until the physiology is understood. So they really do go hand in hand, but it is a difficult subject, so learning anatomy tends to be what we do first, and then put that anatomy together with what it does, and that would be the physiology. With regard to anatomy, there are other disciplines that take place. There's gross anatomy, which would be the study of the body in its its visual form, so what you can see. Microscopic anatomy, so you can take the tissues, the cells, look at them under the microscope for studies such as pathology, etc. And there's also cell physiology, so looking at individual cells and what they are doing in the course of their lives. For example, creating enzymes, creating proteins, going through their metabolic processes, and also mitosis, so doubling themselves. There are special types of physiology and somebody would specialize in a particular organ or an organ system. And then there's pathological physiology, somebody who specializes in the pathology of organs. And all of these are the effects of disease on organs. All of these are other specializations that you go into with your background in A&P. Now, I talked a little bit about the relationship of anatomy and physiology, and just to re-emphasize what I said a couple of minutes ago, they very much work together. Once you understand, in the upper left-hand corner of this image, you have a picture of the heart. It's a little blurry. Your picture in your book's much better, but you have a picture of the heart and a sagittal section of it, so a sagittal view of it, showing the blood flow through the heart. And so the idea is that structure, the pump, the four chambers, is the anatomy, studying those four chambers, the upper and lower chambers of the heart, and knowing that those exist so that blood can be passed through, separated one compartment from another, because in each compartment there is a different part of the circulatory system story taking place. Now, the next topic is the generation of an organism. That's you. That starts from the smallest unit, which the smallest unit are atoms, which you learn about in the next chapter. And atoms get together to form molecules or compounds. Atoms or elements, I guess you might say, models or compounds. Those compounds then interact with each other to form more complex compounds. And then those turn into something that is what we consider a functional unit in terms of the body. A functional unit would be a cell, and so you can think of a cell as being made up of many elements, many compounds, all of them working together to create this one unit that can exist on its own. A cell can exist on its own, doesn't do very much on its own, but it can exist on its own, and that then you have cells get together to form tissue, and tissue is different types of cells getting together. And so the example that we have in the upper level is cardiac muscle, and cardiac muscle is the sum total of muscle tissue, connective tissue, and then also you have nerve involved. So you have muscle, connective, and nervous tissue in just that one type of tissue together. And actually I got a little bit ahead of myself, because when we think of tissue, we think of one type of cell working together. I boo-booed, I'm sorry. Tissue is just one type of cell working together to perform a higher function than it can do by itself. But tissues get together to form organs. So the idea of cardiac tissue, cardiac muscle, getting together with connective tissue, together with a nerve impulse, then you have this organ that we call the heart. Then organs get together to form organ systems, and organ systems, all of the various organ systems you have in your body are getting together to form the organism level, which is you, which is the human being, which is you and I both. Those organ systems that make up the human being are first the integument, and when we think of the integument, we think of the skin. However, it can be more than just the skin. It can be hair. There are accessory organs. So we think of the major organs, and we also think of accessory organs, or organs that function in that system, but also could support other systems. And hair, sweat glands, nails are like that. You also can think of the primary organ as the system just can't exist without it. You can exist without your nails. It's not particularly pleasant. It can be very painful, and you could be more susceptible to injury or infection, but you really can't subsist without your skin altogether. Your skin is a key component to keeping you in homeostasis. You certainly can exist without your hair. Pretty hard to exist without sweat glands. There are people who don't sweat at all, and they have some pretty serious health concerns. There are disorders where people have no capacity to sweat. Functions of the integument: protection from the environment, helps you regulate body temperature along with your adipose tissue, along with your bloodstream, and then almost everything is under the control of the nervous system. And sensory information. In terms of homeostasis, when we talk about receptors, taking the impulse to the control center, otherwise known as the brain, the skin is the biggest receptor that you have. And when you think of receptor, you want to think of sensory. Skeletal system: major organs, bones. You do have cartilage, ligaments, bone marrow. Function to support and protect. Protect for other organs. I cut the organ word off there, sorry. Stores calcium and other minerals, and that marrow that is housed and protected by the bone is where the formed elements come for blood. So the red blood cells and white blood cells come from the marrow of the bone. Muscle system, and all of these systems you learn, you have an entire chapter, sometimes 2 or 3 chapters about in this particular semester. Muscle system, the biggest function is movement. So you have skeletal muscles and the tendons, so the connective tissue that attaches muscles to bones, because it's muscles and bones together that create that movement. Some protection, certainly when you think of your abdominal area, muscles are protection for those abdominal organs. And generates heat. Just think about shivering. And so when you're cold, your muscles shiver to help you increase your core body temperature. So not so much make you warmer so that you can tolerate the cold, but to increase your core body temperature. And nervous system, the next one, and we do study this one individually. You have the CNS, which is the brain and the spinal cord, PNS, which is the peripheral nerves plus sense organs, and the brain is the main coordinator of everything that goes on in the body. Coordinates, interprets, and responds to stimuli. So it's the control center, the command center. Endocrine system, you do not study this in 141. It's a very interesting and complex system made up of glands that secrete hormones. Those hormones will respond to receptor sites on cells distance that are far away from where the hormone is created and secreted. So those hormones that they need to be secreted into the bloodstream. So we call the endocrine system the ductless system. And those hormones will regulate along with the nervous system. So we think of the nervous system as the fast-acting control and command, and the endocrine system the slow-acting control and command, and long-term endocrine system does. But you do have a series of glands, and each of them secrete at least one, and most of them secrete more than one hormone. So you have many hormones circulating around in your bloodstream. Cardiovascular, we talked about this a little bit already, and that is your heart, your blood, and the vessels that the blood is carried in, so the arteries and veins. And the function of the main function of the cardiovascular system is to provide a transportation way for everything that it transports, like nutrients, waste products, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So if it's something that needs to get from point A to point B in the body, it's going to be dumped into the blood, it's going to be found in the blood, and it's going to be transported in the blood. The only things that doesn't happen with is the digestive system, which is a tube system, and even with that, the nutrient portion of the food that you eat actually is going to be reabsorbed into the bloodstream, is going to be absorbed, not reabsorbed into the bloodstream, but absorbed into the bloodstream. And the fat products are going to be absorbed in the lymphatic system and then eventually dumped into the bloodstream. So even that, which is a closed tube type system, the product that you actually eat food for ends up going into the bloodstream. Something like your sweat glands, which are exocrine glands, that does not go into the bloodstream. They have a duct. Those ducts either have an opening to the outside world, like your sweat glands, or they have an opening into something like your pancreas, which it can operate as an endocrine or an exocrine gland, and that pancreas dumps into the GI tract. It's the digestive juices into the GI tract. Lymphatic system, we think of the lymphatic system as your immune system, that which helps you defend against infection and disease. And the lymphatic system works very closely with the cardiovascular system in terms of cleaning blood and then cleaning out anything that is in the body that is thought of as non-self. And so you have self, what the immune system recognizes as self and non-self, and the immune system basically tries to neutralize anything that's non-self. Respiratory, this main function is gas exchange, so bringing oxygen in, carbon dioxide back out. Also facilitates communication. And digestive, we talked about this already a little bit, functions to process the food we eat. Urinary, this is for liquid waste, removing liquid waste from the body. And then you have reproductive, male and female, and this is to promote the ongoing future of the species in terms of reproduction. And we are a reproductive organism where you have a different pathway for males and females, and each of those you will study individually in terms of reproduction. And what I have, this is the last slide I'm going to do for this particular portion of Chapter 1, and so we will pick up right after this with the second portion of Chapter 1 for Bio 141.